Imagine a world without the iPhone in your pocket, the MacBook on your desk, or Pixar movies lighting up your childhood. Now, imagine that all of these innovations were the vision of one man, a man who was fired from his own company, only to return and build it into the most valuable company on earth. This is the story of Steve Jobs, a man whose journey was filled with brilliance, failure, redemption, and timeless lessons that continue to shape our world today. This is not just a story about computers. It's a story about passion, resilience, and how one person can change the world. Steve Paul Jobs was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California. But right from the beginning, life had twists for him. His biological parents, two graduate students, gave him up for adoption. He was taken in by Paul and Clara Jobs, an ordinary working-class couple. Paul Jobs was a machinist and Clara an accountant. They weren't wealthy, but they gave Steve something more valuable: love, stability, and encouragement. But Steve was not an ordinary child. He was endlessly curious. He loved tinkering with electronics, often spending hours in the family garage taking things apart and putting them back together. That garage would later become legendary. At school, Steve was brilliant but rebellious. Teachers saw his potential, but he often challenged authority, hated routine, and played pranks. He wasn't a straight-A student, but his mind was always racing with ideas. In high school, Steve Jobs met Steve Wozniak, a shy but incredibly talented engineer. Wozniak loved building electronics, and Jobs instantly saw the potential of bringing Woz's inventions to the world. Their friendship would spark a revolution. Jobs briefly attended Reed College, but he dropped out after just 6 months. Why? Because he didn't want to waste his adoptive parents' savings on classes he found meaningless. Yet, he stayed on campus, auditing classes he loved, like calligraphy, something that would later shape Apple's beautiful design philosophy. He explored spirituality, traveled to India, experimented with diets and philosophies. Jobs was searching for something deeper, a purpose. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built the first Apple computer in Jobs' garage. They called it the Apple I. It was just a circuit board, but Jobs saw beyond wires and chips. He envisioned computers not just for engineers, but for everyone. Jobs convinced a local computer store to buy 50 units. To deliver, he and Woz worked day and night in the garage. This was the birth of Apple Computer. Soon came the Apple II, one of the first successful mass-market personal computers. By 25, Steve Jobs was a millionaire. Apple went public, and Jobs became a Silicon Valley rock star. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh, a computer that changed everything. It had a graphical interface, a mouse, and design that looked futuristic. But behind the scenes, Apple was in turmoil. The Macintosh was innovative, but sales were weak, and tensions grew between Jobs and Apple's board. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of the company he founded. Imagine that, fired from Apple at just 30 years old. He was devastated. But here's the lesson. Sometimes being knocked down clears the path for your greatest comeback. After Apple, Jobs founded Next, a company that made high-end computers. While Next didn't achieve huge commercial success, its technology later became the foundation for Apple's future systems. But another investment would change Jobs' destiny. In 1986, he bought a small animation studio called Pixar. He believed in their vision, even when no one else did. Years later, Pixar released Toy Story, the first fully computer-animated film. It was a global sensation. Jobs became a billionaire, and Pixar forever transformed entertainment. In 1997, Apple was struggling, on the verge of collapse. That's when Steve Jobs returned. His comeback is one of the greatest in business history. Jobs simplified Apple's product line, cutting unnecessary projects. He launched the iconic Think Different campaign, reminding the world that Apple stood for creativity and innovation. Then came the iMac, colorful, fun, and unlike anything else. It was a hit, but Jobs was just getting started. 2001, the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Suddenly, music would never be the same. 2007, the iPhone, not just a phone, but a computer, camera, and internet device in one. It didn't just change phones, it changed how humans live, work, and communicate. 2010, the iPad. Once again, Jobs created a new category, a device between the phone and the laptop. Each product launch was more than technology. It was theater. Jobs was a master storyteller, unveiling products with simplicity and suspense, always ending with his famous line, "One more thing." But even as Apple soared, Steve Jobs faced his toughest challenge, his health. In 2003, he was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. He delayed surgery, trying alternative treatments, but eventually underwent major operations. Despite his illness, Jobs continued working, unveiling product after product, changing the world while battling for his life. In August 2011, Jobs resigned as CEO of Apple, saying he could no longer meet his duties. Just 2 months later, on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned. Presidents, CEOs, artists, and millions of fans. Billions of lives had been touched by his vision. Steve Jobs' life was not perfect. He was known to be demanding, intense, sometimes even harsh. But his passion, vision, and refusal to settle for good enough made him one of the greatest innovators of all time. What can we learn from Steve Jobs? Follow your passion. Even when the path isn't clear, don't fear failure. Sometimes it's the setback that sets you up for your biggest success. Simplicity is powerful. Great design is not just how it looks, but how it works. Your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Steve Jobs once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." And he proved it. From a garage in California to shaping the future of technology, Steve Jobs' story is more than just history. It's a reminder that one idea, one dream, one relentless individual can truly change the world. This was the story of Steve Jobs. If you found inspiration here, share it, because his story is not just about Apple, it's about all of us.